Computer. Okay, so welcome again to UX Greece Meetup. This is a joint event of Thessaloniki UX Meetup and Athens UX community. Okay, I'm Ioannis Feneris. Dimitris Stathis is next to me, and Panagiotis Zacharias is going to join us in a few minutes. As I said, at the end, we're going to give 2 books to like people of the audience. So stay with us to tell you how. We want to thank our sponsors, Zansin Labs, From Scratch Design Studio, and the UX Prodigy for supporting our events, both in Thessaloniki UX Meetup and in Athens UX community. And of course, we want to thank OKThes for providing us this Zoom account for this call. Although we didn't hit that capacity that we aimed for, but that's okay. Special thanks to Dimitris Niavis, who ran all the logistics for this meetup. Dimitris, thanks again. Special thanks to you. So today, we are so glad to have with us Jaime Levy. Jaime is, you know who's Jaime. She's a strategist, UX or product. She will talk about this in a minute. Author of the UX strategy book, professor and trainer. And today's topic is the evolution of UX strategy. After 6 years, if I'm not wrong, this is the 2nd edition of the UX strategy book. So Jaime, we want to know, why do we need to have a 2nd edition now at this point? Of course, we're going to have a Q&A with Jaime at the end. So bring your questions. We're going to give you gifts, and at the end, we're going to open the microphones and have a chat. We want to. Those meetups are in person, and but now they are online, so we miss this networking at the end, having some beverages. So we are going to open the microphones and let's have a chat or do whatever, meet each other. So, Jaime, the stage is yours. I'm going to stop sharing my presentation and you can share yours.
Okay, let me get this going.
In the meanwhile, you can say where you're from, city and country. It would be great to see where are we from. So, Jaime.
Hey, everybody. Am I sharing screen? All good?
Yeah, great.
Fantastic. Maybe I should move my little thing with you guys away from the screen. It's like the choice of getting to look at you versus my deck. So hi, everybody. I'm coming at you from Berlin, Germany, where I've been hiding for the last couple of months and most of the last 2 years. I'm so excited to be here for, well, I'd be more excited if I was in Greece right now for a live on-site meetup event. But I'll be coming there in July for vacation to go to Crete, and then I'm hopefully going to be coming back in October to do a workshop. But I'm here now from Germany, and a few weeks ago my book came out, the 2nd edition, and so I'm really excited to be talking about it. And so I'm just going to start in with the talk, and I look forward to your questions at the end. I'm not going to be really paying attention to the chat because it'll make me very distracted. So away we go. So for this 2nd edition, which came out this year, the 1st edition came out in 2015. I retitled the subhead for the book. It used to be called UX Strategy, How to Devise Innovative Solutions. And now it's called Product Strategy Techniques for Devising Innovative Solutions. And so most of this talk is about why I sort of pivoted on these terms and how I differentiate between them. But it's also really looking at the evolution of my discovery of the term UX strategy and taking you along for the ride. So let me back it up 15 years ago when I was working at an agency called Schematic in Los Angeles, California. And I I actually have been doing this interface design, interaction design, information architecture, UX design, whatever you want to call it today or and next week, for, since I was in my 20s, so 30 years. And I went through a period of time where, I was a successful .com person. And then I went through a period of time where I, the bubble burst and I had to start from the bottom, which was actually really good for me. So when I came back up for air, I was a UX designer at Schematic, but I was already in my mid 30s with a ton of interface design and product strategy experience. And, but, I had to go through this whole process of learning to wireframe, as opposed to doing everything in my head. So I was there and really wanting to have a say in strategy. And I kept hearing about this elusive thing called the discovery phase. And all I knew was that I needed to be part of this thing, because I would, I just really didn't have a say in what the product was going to be, and I wanted to figure out what it was. So what happened was I luckily, because I was a woman, it worked for me in my favor at this point, because this website project came in to redesign Oprah Winfrey's website for her television show Oprah. And so they decided that they would throw me on this discovery phase. So I flew out to Chicago, and I met with the stakeholders, and I had the whole team with me. We had people from different functional groups and account managers, and then they had like 8 stakeholders there, all women, all bitchy women, and I was really intimidated. I had a mentor there, my friend Mark Sloan, who had done tons of discovery phase workshops. And so I got to watch him lead these sessions where he did these things called concept maps. And basically they're just simple diagrams. You could see the original versions on the left of these diagrams, where we were trying to ultimately get the stakeholders on the same page, whether it was about what what the vision was, what it really meant, Oprah to these people, how to look at the content, really just like understanding what the website needed to accomplish for this redesign. And so, we did these exercises for a couple of days, and this was really great. And then we came back to the office in Los Angeles, and they said, okay, now you need to make these personas. And I said, well, are we going to do some user research? And they're like, no, we got you covered. We have all this marketing data. Just make them off this. And I didn't know what the deal was. So I was like, okay. And so I made these bogus personas based on that. They said, okay, we need to have one who's somebody who's from the city, and one who's someone from the suburbs, and one who's like somebody who makes a lot of money, and one who doesn't, and someone who's Caucasian, and someone who's and I'm like, my head was spinning and I couldn't figure out why we were making these weird things. But I did as I was told, so I knocked out these personas, and we basically moved to turning in the discovery brief after 1 week. And then I spent 9 months overseeing the team knocking out just wireframe after wireframe, while the stakeholders went back to, they didn't care what the brief said. They didn't care about what we thought about revenue streams. They didn't care about us doing any forms of user research to figure out what the actual website should do to really make their users happy. They just wanted to fight about the real estate, and fight about the logo, and fight about the colors. And so by the time this whole project, actually before it was done, I left. I was so disgusted, because I realized this discovery phase thing that was also being referred to as this UX strategy phase was a complete farce. And so I decided that I really wanted to learn everything I could possibly know about UX strategy. But this is 2008, and there was a few articles about this term. or about what UX strategy was. I knew that the discovery phase, that term was borrowed from, lawyers use it when they're trying to prepare attorneys to go to court and gather evidence and know everything about what might happen in the trial so that they're completely prepared. So I understand that, what that was, but I had to really try to figure out like what was strategy and where it intersected. So I picked up this book by Indy Young called Mental Models, and in it was this sidebar. And it had this kind of Shakespearean sounding definition that I couldn't make much sense of. But it also had this equation, and it said experience strategy equals business strategy plus UX strategy. Now, the issue with this was that if you use deduction, it said basically UX plus business equals experience. And I really saw these terms as like, well, what's the difference between UX strategy and experience strategy? What does this all mean? So it really left me with more questions than answers. So what happened was I started really looking at the company where Indy Young and these other founders worked, which was called Adaptive Path. And you can see above that I went back to their website using the Wayback Machine to 2007 and 2008 to see, to give you a representation of what I was seeing at that time. But they basically, they were pitching their company as a company that did product experience strategy and experience design. And Indy Young was there, and she was one of the founders. And so were some really other important people in the field of UX. Like they really set, what were the deliverables and artifacts? What was the process? Where did it all come together? And so they had one of their services was experience strategy and design. And so they had it pretty clear that, it was basically, collaborative ideation with the clients here, field research and ethnography, and competitive analysis. So at least I knew that I needed to learn like how to do a proper competitive analysis and how to do forms of field research. So fast forward several years now to 2016, and I'm at UX Week. And my book has come out, and I'm speaking there about UX strategy, and I get to meet Indy Young. And so I had a really good conversation to her about the diagram. And I said, Indy, I'm really trying to understand what the difference is between UX strategy and experience strategy, because looking at your website, it kind of seems like UX design plus business strategy equals experience strategy. And she basically told me in so many words that it was a typo. So what I learned was that I wrote an entire book with the title UX Strategy based on a typo. But it was too late. The cat was out of the bag. There were already, at this point, hundreds of people running around with the title Experience Strategist, and then at least 500 by the time when my book came out. There was 3 people, including me, with the title UX Strategist, and then it ballooned up to 500. But there were still like so many people fighting over the terminology, just like they were with UX, with interaction design, and with versus UX design, and new media versus whatever it was called, multimedia. So it was just really frustrating because it was just like another term that people were wasting time confusing, whether it was recruiters, people going to college, people who were trying to market themselves as doing strategy. So I had to come to terms with that. But in my first book, how I defined UX strategy was that it's the vision of a solution that needs to be validated with real potential customers to prove that it's desired in the marketplace. And this is a lot of words to say, basically, that we have our product vision, which is great. This idea of what you think the product should be, the business concept, in other words. But it needs to be validated, meaning proven that there's actually customers out there that want it. And the reason for this is because you want to de-risk this value proposition before you release a product to market, and then spend a ton of money on it and find out that it fails. So, UX strategy is really this overarching big picture, this high level plan to achieve one or more business goals under conditions of uncertainty. And it's all these uncertainties that we're trying to de-risk with our strategy techniques. But what I've been finding is over the years is that this term UX strategy has evolved even further. It's taken on new meaning where it actually means more often than not that it to be strategically executing UX at a particular organization or business unit. Like, we want to evangelize the UX throughout the company, or we want to prove the ROI of the UX, or we want to have a UX playbook that says who does what. And I'm not saying that it's wrong or that it's right. It's just like a different definition because it's very focused on process, whereas how I was looking at it was doing a strategy for a product. So for the last 12 years, I've had a Google search, a Google alert, where it's just been crawling the web for anyone who might use the term either UX strategy or user experience strategy. And it's been pretty interesting. What you typically see is this, like them using it for job titles and it not having anything to do with strategy for a product or de-risking value propositions. It's like guide the UX strategy in the direction of the design sprints. That's their strategy with a small s. Or drive the UX strategy for Aladdin Studio through thoughtful design concepts, prototypes. That sounds like process to me. Or how about this one? Chicago designers share how they measure UX design, scroll visitor recordings, and more to inform a majority of its UX strategy. Or how about this one? The master class will provide concrete and practical information to help you understand UX from a holistic experience. Develop your UX strategy. Audio UX strategy will become an important part of an integral strand of audio. Oh my God, user experience strategy will incorporate UX into your business and help you create a well-established system. We can use the latest techniques in user experience strategy, including eye tracking heat map analysis, using Fenke to identify blind spots. So all this is to say that that's not what I meant by my first book. And so that's why I've been going with the term product strategy. It just makes a lot more sense if we're talking about trying to, figure out the strategy for a product before you release it to the market. And if you look at the definition here, it's basically the same definition that I had for the first book, which is, this big picture context. And so the focus is very much on, figuring out, what the product's going to be. And then ultimately, once you do, creating a roadmap for it. So that's why the way I've been using it these days is that, yeah, I'm sticking with, here's my UX strategy framework. But then when I talk about my techniques, I say they're product strategy techniques. So let's talk about my framework for a little bit. This hasn't changed from the first book to the second book. The only thing that really changed about the fourth one, frictionless UX, was it used to be called killer UX, which I think I just had done a little bit too much surfing, was thinking about killer waves. And it really always meant to me, killer UX meant frictionless UX. So that was the only thing I changed with my framework. But let me go through these 4 tenets. The first one is business strategy. Now, business strategy is really understanding, where, let's say that you are working, you're working, whether it's at an enterprise, an agency, or a startup. Now, whatever products or services you're working on, you need to really understand, what is the goal of the company that's putting those products or services out there? What's their business model for the products and services? What are the potential revenue streams? What is their cost structure? These are all things that if they sound like terms that you don't know, they're not that hard to learn. And so I really wanted to use the book to basically give people, like a Cliff Notes version of these terms, using the most, best-selling and popular business strategy books out there. So this is the breakdown of a business plan and of a business model. And these are the types of terms that you really want to understand. And the best way to go about it is I believe, to use the business model canvas. There's a book called Business Model Generation that was written by Alex Osterwalder and Yves Pengate. And it's basically a way to ideate very quickly, with all these canvases on different concepts and plug and play different ideas and start really understanding, especially these things on the right here are very much, I'm just going to say UX/product strategy and use them interchangeably at this point. Understanding like who's the customer segment that you're targeting, and figuring out like, do you have two customer segments? If it's a two-sided marketplace, like for instance, Airbnb, where you have hosts and you have guests, the people who are subletting the rooms and the people who are renting the rooms or the flats. Understanding the relationship to the segments. Is it going to be, are you marketing at them through online social channels like Facebook, or are you do you need to have, be able to reach them through have a customer service on the phone? Understanding really what is the value prop of the business, understanding the different revenue streams for monetizing the customers. Those are very much baked into the product strategy, and to be, to move up, from product design, UX design into a leadership role, you really want to understand this vernacular, because this is how the stakeholders talk to each other. Now, these things on the left, they can be a bit more elusive to understand, and when you're doing these types of canvases, this is where you want to bring in people from the business side to help you understand the partners and the activities, the resources, and the cost structure. Now, I break this down in my book, but there's plenty of information on the internet about these things. And I highly recommend, if you aren't familiar with business models, starting with this canvas or starting with Ash Maurya's Lean canvas. They're almost identical. I compare them side by side and talk about the distinctions. But the Lean canvas is a bit more friendly because, it's geared more for startups. And, you start, the numbering is basically where you start with these things. You're going to figure out the segments first, and then what's the problem that you want to solve, what's the unique value prop, and so on. So really getting your head around, and using the canvases as a crutch, and also as a way to build consensus on the product vision, is a really great way to get started in understanding business strategy and how it intersects with UX design to become product strategy. Now, to really understand the strategy of the products, I think the most important thing to do is to really know how to do competitive research. So I have 2 chapters dedicated to this from the first book and in the second one, and I've only fine-tuned these techniques, both for conducting research and for doing the analysis of the competitors. And it's very labor intensive. You can work, I have a toolkit. You can go to jaimelevy.com or userexperiencestrategy.com and download the free toolkit that has this competitive research matrix. But it's really about understanding, how to figure out like who's a competitor and an indirect competitor, learning about nascent markets, learning about and looking at everything, not just saying, oh, their website's really nice or not so nice, but understanding the different things like revenue streams and where they're getting their traffic and how they market themselves on social networks. All of these things are really important when you're trying to compare competitors, side by side. And then once you've done the competitive research, then you want to do a SWOT analysis on each of the competitors from their perspective, and then do an aggregated analysis so that you can do then output something like a findings brief, which I explain in detail also in the book, with much cleaner examples that I've been basically calibrating over the last 5 years by, because I've been doing workshops all over the world, and really trying to figure out like, what's the best way to present all this data. So that's what this, where business strategy comes into play. So this next tenet is called value innovation. And this term I got from the book Blue Ocean Strategy, where they talk about value innovation basically being about like lowering the cost either of, for the buyer by lowering the cost structure of the business, or figuring out a way to create the products and services so they cost less money, but also increasing the value. Now, as far as how this really fits in with the product design, to me, it's about minimalism and really focusing on what is the primary utility of the product, and moving away from having tons of features and creating and focusing on the key features that really make it an indispensable part of somebody's life. So what they did was basically took Michael Porter's 2 ways to have a competitive advantage, which was differentiation and lower costs, and mash them together. So the way I look at it, when you transpose it into the digital world, because things aren't quite the same, in digital as they are with traditional business strategy. It's just, there's so many products that are free to users. So all of a sudden you have these revenue streams that look at monetization in new ways. And so to me, what it came down to was going back to Indy's book, Mental Model, and really understanding, what is the mental model that a customer/user has when they come to your product, and what is it going to take to have them experience the aha moment of your value proposition through your digital interface. And so often it's like thinking about the experience in the offline world. Like if we think of hitchhiking, if we go back in time to when most of you guys were little kids, but like, I don't know about you, but hitchhiking was a very dangerous thing. You didn't want to get into a stranger's car, nor did you want to let them into your car. Bad things could happen, especially if you're a woman. But now, you use a product like Uber, and it's no big deal. All of a sudden you're getting into strangers' cars, or if you're an Uber or Lyft or any of these other ride-hailing platforms, you're letting people into your car all the time. And the mental model has completely shifted. And so when you see these shifts in these mental models, then you see, what people basically call disruptive innovation, because people are changing the way that they look at accomplishing a goal in a major way. So another tenet is validated user research. Now, how this is different than just traditional user research is it's got that word validated in front of it. And this term was really popularized when Eric Ries put out Lean Startup. And people started adopting all these different lean ways to conduct experiments to learn about validating hypotheses, and that the goal was to have measurable results. So I riffed on this with my book and said, well, how can we do some form of systematic way of building a product that's focused on the value prop, and then testing it to see if it would deliver on something that people would like, but not building anything at all. So here we're looking at a storyboard that was actually, this was by Demetris, who is how I come to you now, because I was looking for someone who could draw really well, and he could. So he helped with this fantastic storyboard. But basically, if you read through it, you'll see that it's just simple images that start with the problem. Jen needed to get to work because traffic and she'll be late, and ends with the solution. Jen makes it to work on time. So we basically bookmark these, bookend these two things, and then say, okay, what are the key features that are going to make this work and deliver on this value proposition? Now, a lot of people use storyboards for all kinds of different forms. I mean, obviously they're used in film, and they're used in commercials. They're used for so many different things, but when they're used for product design, they tend to be, focused a bit more toward usability. And I'm bending everything to focus more on value propositions and business models. And so when you see these things, what we're looking at are really the screens that make a difference, so that we can use the storyboards for building consensus with the team. These are not a deliverable. Before we move into rapid prototyping. So here you see just a hand-drawn version that can be done in under 30 minutes, that gets the concept across. And then here we see one that's more mocked up using higher fidelity images, that also does the same job, but could be put in front of a client potentially, so they can walk through it. And knocking out a bunch of storyboards is far more lean, far more iterative, the potential to be iterative because it is lightweight. And it really forces you to say, okay, what can I do with 6 panels? And it's not about the number 6, just like doing user research isn't about the number 5. It's about giving yourself some kind of limit, so that you're saying, okay, what is the least amount that I can do here that will get the story across? And so you're starting out really building your narrative with the captions. And so here, like you could see in caption 5 that, I'm just showing a text message to get through the screens here. But the point is to show that, some things are going to happen inside of the app or on the website, and some things are just going to happen with notifications because they're really an intrinsic part of the customer experience and the user experience design. So once you have storyboards, or basic script, that's when you can move into rapid prototyping, because you basically have your starting point and your ending point. And I, highly recommend tools like Figma and Adobe XD to just knock out prototypes quickly, using their toolkits, and using screen grabs to get things as fast as possible, but truly focusing on the key features, not spending time reinventing design. Like here, I'm just grabbing on the left a screen from the Apple bar when I want to book appointments to take my computer in for work. And then on the right, I'm showing basically the prices, so I could get feedback on when they see the cost of doing a wedding through the platform versus doing it with the current solutions, that it would be actually so much less. But I needed to have a screen in here that, so once they got through the aha moment, they could really then get to this point and see the breakdown of how much it would cost for them. And then once you have the product, I get into conducting online qualitative user research. Now, the first book was focused on doing it in the field, but because I wrote the book during the pandemic, I really needed to pivot hard and figure out, well, can online research be conducted in a methodical way where we can get measurable results? So I created more tools for my toolkit, which includes this user research spreadsheet, where you basically pop in the different people who are going to be interviewed and have this quick way for to take notes into, so that you can do a comparison across the different participants, so that you can do an analysis quickly. So here we're looking at a rapid prototype in the bottom right. We're looking at, here we're actually seeing Nico, who's conducting the study, and then we see his spreadsheet set up on the left side there. And then at the very end, trying to figure out, like, how can I present the results to the stakeholders so that they're meaningful, and really coming up with, like, what did I learn? And we're not talking about usability. It doesn't really matter if somebody can use your product if they don't want it to begin with. So it's extremely important that the questions be geared toward, do they like the key feature, and is it important to them that would, make it actually be a key feature? Do they understand the overall value proposition? Is it something they would use? Would they pay for it at the price that you cite there? Or would there be some other possible business model? But trying to present the data in a way so it's, has these like validation baked into it and percentages is the big idea. Now, another technique, this is the 9th chapter in the book, I talk about are basically conducting quantitative online user research. Now, most people don't call it that, but basically they call it doing landing page experiments, doing online advertising experiments, or even they get called doing smoke tests. So now we're looking at a smoke test done by Volkswagen. They have this big initiative called We Share, where the big idea before COVID was that you could, buy a Volkswagen or VW if you're here, and you would be able to have everything from like your dry cleaning delivered to your car, that you could just like leave the car parked on the street and put it in share mode and someone else could use it. They had all these big ideas before COVID. And one of them was that there would be this built-in app, in the car, so that people could actually get car washes, that it was part of the cost of, let's say, buying the car. It was part of a package. And so they wanted to test out like who would be interested in car wash. Would it be people in the city? Would it be people in the rural areas? And so that's what they really wanted to learn. So they created this landing page. I mean, as you can see, it says nothing about Volkswagen on it. They basically put it up at a URL, and it doesn't really matter for you to know what it says in German. But what you can see is that they're very, very simple. They have, the most important thing is the call to action, because you're trying to get people to click on it so you can really test the conversion and see if people were interested in the app. And so what they do is you run and advertise an online ad at it. You could use Google search terms, or you can use, the dreaded Facebook. But Facebook, for better or worse, mostly worse, is really great at micro-targeting. And so with micro-targeting, you can run these ads and run them in a very specific time period, run them at a very specific customer segment, i.e. rural part of Germany versus a city in Germany, and then get back results like this in a very short period of time with very little money. In fact, I have my students at the University of Southern California. Every semester I teach the class. I have them run experiments where they spend $5 to $10 on an ad campaign. And we usually see with the spread, like some results, and then we can just keep iterating until we get there. But the big idea is that you're looking at what we see circled in red there is the conversions, and you could see from looking at in the right column that, they had much higher conversion with the one that was running at a rural region versus the city. And so, and this is the way it was presented. And the reason it was really important to me to have this case study in my book, because the first book really focused on startups that I'd worked with, was two reasons. One was it was important for me that the book was more focused on enterprise versus startup, because there's so many more people that work in enterprise than startups. So that was really big. So I wanted to show like, hey, there's this company called Volkswagen, probably heard of them, right? That are conducting experiments. So it might be okay for you. And then on top of that, I wanted the book to be more global. So I was really excited to be able to document their process for the book. So that brings us to the fourth tenet, which is frictionless UX. Now, all my techniques are pretty much focused on the first 3 tenets, and frictionless UX is baked into all of them. You know, it's like we want to create a product that people can figure out by looking at it. You know, that's the goal, is we don't want them struggling on that. Sure, we can put onboarding hints, but the more we do that, we're just introducing more friction between the user / customer trying to accomplish their goal. Now, designing frictionless UIs has become quite popular. In fact, they have, you know, it's part of what they call growth hacking. Now there's another movement called growth design. If you read Niriel's book, Hooked, he's got another model around it. But it's really this idea of understanding, you know, what are the points where people could potentially, the touch points throughout your product, including the first time the user even hears of the thing, to get them to come in from the top of the funnel and then through all the different touch points and then come out at the bottom, you know, either a paying customer or a happy customer that you can monetize in other ways. So I'd like to end this with this quote, which is how I actually start the book, and tell you why I chose this quote. And it's from a very famous poem called The Road Not Taken by Robert Frost. And he basically talks about, you know, taking the road less traveled. Now, I think if you want to be a strategist, you know, you have to be open to taking the road less traveled, because it really requires that you're, you know, open to taking risks, that you're open to conducting experiments and having them fail, that you're open to presenting your failures to your boss or your client and saying, hey, this is what I learned, and this is how I'm going to, you know, set up the next experiment. Or I learned this, and now I think we should potentially pivot on the value proposition. But it really requires, if you're going to move into strategy, that you're open, you know, to this idea of failure, because it's not really failure if you learn something. You know, this idea that you, you know, you could potentially, you know, oh, I don't want to show it too soon because, you know, people won't really get it. You know, we really need to move away from this and figure out, like, how can we get our product concept in front of the stakeholders and in front of customers as soon as possible, so that we can learn, do they even want this thing? Be open to the idea that there's not just one good idea, that we should be exploring multiple ideas, and then potentially, you know, cherry pick the best ofs from these different ideas. And then as far as your career goes, it's like not just being complacent and staying at one job forever unless you're constantly learning. You know, every year that goes by in your career is a year that you should be growing. And I say that now as someone who's 55 years old. You know, when I decided to, actually before I decided on my second book, I was sitting at a cafe with a friend, and I was just like, oh, you know, yeah, the first book was a bestseller, and I don't think I can do that with another book, and I don't want to have a second book fail, and, you know, and, you know, like, oh, I don't know, you know, what I should do, what's going to happen if I fail. And he's just like, well, if you do nothing, isn't that far worse? You know, you'll just never know. You know, and I realized that he was right, you know, and that this goes, you know, this affects our life, you know, this, you know, fear of taking risk, you know, it can so easily prevent us from really, you know, exploring the world. And so that's why that quote is there. Anyhow, I'm not going to try to say this word, but thank you so much. And I'm excited to hear your questions.
Thank you, Jamie. Thank you very much. That was great. Very insightful. And I'm sure that a lot of questions, we have a lot of questions, but more of them are going to be thrown here. Okay, first, let me say that Panagiotis is with us. Also, Dimitris and the other Dimitris are with us. We are sorry for that 100 limit technical issue. We are going to give the record, of course, in a few weeks. So that's the plan B. So we are 100 people. Let's start the Q&A. Anyone that wants to ask anything, please raise your hand in order to call you to ask directly your question. Until that point, I'm going to read the questions from the chat. And I tried to make some themes of the questions. So let's talk about today and the next years. Radu is asking, where do you see UX strategy in 5 years' time? What would you say would be the main changes?
Thanks. I don't know. I'm right now in the present. Like, who cares about 5 years? What are you doing about it now? Like, why does that matter? Like, I don't really understand. Let's talk about now. It's like, what I want to hear from what people are doing that's strategic at their current positions, and what's working and what's not working.
Okay, great. That's a great pass for my question. So let's talk about now. Why do we still need to talk about working in iterations and watch out the assumptions and validate the hypothesis? Isn't this the default way? Why do we still need to promote that this would be a great way? And I'm talking about now, not 5 years.
Yeah. I mean, 5 years from now, the whole world could blow up at the rate we're going. So let's talk about now, guys. I mean, didn't we just go through some terrible shit? Because they just haven't been adopted, worldwide. I have a client in California that's still like pretending that they're agile when they're waterfall. That still like says, oh, we're going to focus on these really important features, and then they go ahead and validate them, and then they go ahead and knock out, a Miro board and a roadmap, and then they hand it off to dev, and then the developers like say, oh, this is going to take too much time, we're going to get rid of a bunch of features, without even validating that, hey, this is the right thing to do. There's just so many opportunities for things to get messed up, especially in large enterprises. And so why we're still talking about, I think UX people are more aware of lean startup, because it just made UX design so much more important. So we're all, drinking the Kool-Aid, but these corporations and the startups are more often than not, but the corporations, it's a big shift for them to approach this. And that's why we hear even bigger terms like digital transformation, because you can't have experiments run at a corporation where they're not open to running them. And it takes this like culture of innovation, or whatever the hell they want to call it, where it's like this open mindset for saying, okay, we're not going to have this total hierarchical structure of, here's the PM man, and then here's the boss man, and these other people, that you have to have this like collaborative, more flat, lack of hierarchy. And so I think that's why we're not seeing it adopted, is because we just have these companies that move very slowly, where we have these, stakeholders who are just like, I don't want to give away, any, I don't want to like have anyone telling me what the strategy could be. I want to do it. And so the most common question I get is, how can I be strategic when my boss won't let me? And it really has to be about, at a certain point where you take the initiative, where you are like, I'm going to be entrepreneurial. I'm not going to wait for them to tell me I can do a competitive analysis. I'm going to do it anyway, even if I have to do it at night or on the weekends. Or I'm not going to wait for them to tell me I'm going to run my user research as an experiment. I'm going to do it anyway. And then I'm going to present it them and say, hey, what do you think? Like when you present this evidence in this way, it's harder for them to argue with you when you present in such a way like, here, so 90% of people said that they would never use this product, and here's their names. I don't know what to think. What do you think? Oh, you think that maybe we should go in a different direction? I don't know. Yeah, I think you're right. And then all of a sudden they're saying what you thought, but it's coming out of their mouth. So you still get what you want. And they don't feel like, oh, you told them what to do. It was their idea. You just brainwashed them to think that. And I feel like that's kind of the only way to start building trust, and let them run with it. But then they all of a sudden get this like, oh, wow, that person is actually going to be really helpful to me. I'm going to have them do it again and again and again. So it's really about, taking initiative and building trust if you want to run experiments and if you want to do strategy.
Okay, great. And I think that you answered Panagiotis' question. Panagiotis is the organizer of the Athens UX Community Meetup. He asks, how can we convince business people to really understand the value of UX work? Any simple tips? You gave the greatest tip, which I'm going to print a t-shirt. I'm going to do it anyway, and that's the data. But any other tips? Any tips on from your experience on how can business people see like our world and get the value, the return of investment of the UX work?
Yeah. So are you asking about, why are you asking me about how they get the work of UX?
It's a typical question of one UXer to another. How did you convince your stakeholders?
I'm just being honest. It's like every single company is different. It's like, I'm not going to pretend I know the answer to that, because, it's like, I believe obviously that evidence, you need, and that's why you need to run things as experiments, that you need to, do these, present it to them so it looks like, oh, wow, you have a findings brief. Oh, wow, you have a user research brief. Not be doing competitive research in a Google Doc with a bunch of screen grabs and saying, oh, here, I did a competitive research of the bunch of apps, and this is what I think. Like, if you're not talking their language of business models, then to them, you're just like a wireframe monkey, and that's what it really, a lot of people tend to blame everyone else for their problems. And I feel like you need to try everything. I mean, this is how it worked for me. Try everything that you can conceivably possible to do product strategy, and then put the evidence in front of them. And then by the second time, if they ignore you, go get another job. Because you're just wasting your time and being frustrated, or accept that that's your reality and do that for them and try to do product strategy on the side until you have enough confidence to go get another job. But people, I promise you, do not come up to you at your desk and say, hey, can you do some strategy? No, they want more prototypes and wireframes and this kind of stuff out of designers. That's what they that's what they hire those roles for. So you really need to take initiative and be okay with it.
Thank you very much. Okay, so I'm going this to an expected area. Let's talk about UX and product. And the first question is my question. You have mentioned the answer of this question both today and in your book, but I want to ask this and broadcast it to the audience. If you could let's say we are in a parallel universe and you write the first edition today, would the title be UX strategy, or would it be product strategy, or would you consider to be product strategy?
Okay, it would be exactly what it is, UX strategy, because that was the title that people really, if I call it product strategy at that time, as I say with that book, product strategy was something that wasn't necessarily associated with digital products. Like, I searched LinkedIn. I mean, I'm like a LinkedIn freak, like at that time, how many people call themselves product strategists? And it just wasn't a common title in digital, because mostly product strategy is owned by the product manager, by the product owner. And so product strategy is something done by them. And as soon as the designers start doing it, then they're like, you're in my, my sandbox, get the hell out. So I stuck with UX strategy because actually it was called user experience strategy, and O'Reilly smartly said, make it short. So they made it UX strategy. And I wanted a book that was UX for the product designers, which were called UX designers back then, and the strategy for all the entrepreneurs and for the UX people that wanted to learn about strategy. And that was it. Fast forward years later, and all of a sudden UX designers are called product designers. So it made sense to then say, okay, it's product strategy. Just kidding. I'm going with that, guys, and I'm going to use them interchangeably until the other UX strategy can go away. But these terms are just we just kind of got to roll with it. Like, I was like, am I going to really go through my book and and cross them out. And I was like, nah, you know, it's just ridiculous. You know, it's too hard. You know, product / UX is basically, to us, the same thing.
Great. So another question of that I have for about 5 years, and you are the one that I have to ask. Do you think that the product manager, the digital product manager role, is the correct role for containing the strategy thread, or do we need to separate those roles? It's different to do strategy, and it's different to do management of the product. Do you think that the product management role is okay, or do you think that we have an inflation there?
Yeah, I think it's just as conflated as UX designers who want to be strategic. It's just one of those things. Strategy, come on. Most people want, at a certain point, to have a say in the product, to have a seat at the strategy table, whether that be a manager or a designer. You know, a lot of people, you know, and marketing people. So strategy is like this yummy, you know, candy to people who are trying to advance their careers. And managing a bunch of people isn't necessarily fun after a long time. So product managers definitely want to have a say in strategy and be doing product roadmaps. And so, like, for instance, this client I had worked with yesterday on their process, you know, they had this Miro board where they had all the things a product strategist does and all the things their product managers do. And then all these things, you know, the UX stuff. And I'm like, wait a minute, these things for the product manager and these things for the product strategist, do you actually have people with these two titles? And he's like, no, well, we aspire to, you know. So I think at this point, it's hard to say. If I had to bet, I would say that there's going to be way more product strategists, you know, which is why, you know, I'm moving in that direction, why I call myself that. You know, I think it's about time, you know, the UX strategy, you know, as we saw from all those Google alerts, it really just means process. You know, like, let Jared Spool have that lane and call, and because it is a whole field into itself. If you want to focus on optimizing process, there's lots of opportunity to do that. But if your heart is in product like me, then, you know, it just makes sense to put the word strategy, and I can't say that it should just be ours. I think we need to share it with the whole team. And that when we do these, you know, competitive research and user research, that it should be the whole team is involved.
Thank you very much. Dimitris Niavis, do you want to open your microphone and ask directly Jamie? And until that point, Dana is asking, how can UX strategists differ from the typical UX designers? So how would you say that, what is the difference, the main difference between a UX designer and the UX strategist?
I don't know. Look on LinkedIn.
Okay.
It's like, what am I, a dictionary? Like, really?
I think that we are looking you as a dictionary right now.
I mean, I guess what is a UX designer? A UX designer, you know, do they knock out wireframes, or are they doing visual design? Like, everywhere you go, they're doing, and I'm not trying to put you on the spot, you're doing fantastic. You know, it's just like, I get these questions all the time, and it's like, there's no, we look at the job descriptions, they're different, you know, some of them just copy paste the same ones, and some of them say, okay, I want to hire someone who's a UX designer who's full stack, you know. So we can't, you know, all I can say is, like, if you're doing design, you tend to be doing design artifacts, you know, and less user research in some places. So then all of a sudden you have to differentiate and have a user research role. If you want to do strategy, there still are very few roles for product strategists. You tend to get them from when you're already in there and say, I want to do product strategy, and then start saying, okay, I want this new title to go along with it. You're not going to go walk in somewhere in most cases and get a product strategy job. It's more likely that you're going to get a product owner job where you get to do product strategy. And there's like no freelance product strategy jobs, because they want that work done inside of, whether it be the startup or the enterprise. So, you know, I think it's important to focus on the techniques of doing product strategy and less so on these titles, because they're too overlapping and they're meaningless. But the things that aren't meaningless are, what is competitive research? What is validated user research? What is storyboarding? What is rapid prototyping? These are all things that are totally accomplishable that you can take with you as you apply for these jobs. And then when you do look at them, when you're applying for a UX strategy job, is it the process kind? And are you going to be cool with that? Because we saw what those jobs are. There's tons of them. Or is it one that's focused on product, or is it both? Say what?
Sorry, I'm mute. Dimitris?
Yeah, first of all, thank you, Jamie, for the presentation. I'm sorry we didn't get all the people in to hear you, but I'm happy that we record this. So my question would be, since it seems that we live in an age that everybody jumps from one job description to the next hot thing in the UX world, how would you suggest that we deal with UX strategists, people that pose as strategists, that mess up the whole UX process and the whole product development? How would you suggest that the practitioners that face these people deal with them?
Wait, how do we deal with the UX strategists? I'm sorry.
Strategists, not the strategists, not the people that actually know what they're doing, but people posing as strategists, which lead to actually UX or product tragedies, right? Because
Right. So the question is, how do we deal with strategy posers?
yeah, you could say that.
With evidence. You know, it just comes down to, I feel like it just comes down to being able to show them with something that you're on the right track versus arguing with them. I mean, I don't like it. I don't like my answer either. You know, I would much rather just like go up to them and say, look, dude, I have 30 years experience and I know how to do blah, blah, blah. But it's not going to win anything. They're just going to say I'm a jerk off, you know? So I got to go in saying, wow, you know, I think, I'm not saying to like go in and gaslight these people, but you want to go in and say, hey, I really respect the work that you're doing, and I'm really excited to work with you on this project. And I just want to be careful not to ever step on your toes. Do you think we could have a brief meeting to just talk about the different artifacts that I'd like to work on, and then show them examples of some of them, you know, some of the work you've done, and then say, would you like to work with me on this? And they may just be thinking, oh, well, you know, see if they react like, you know, like a crazy dog, and just be like, no, you shouldn't be doing that. And then you'll get that vibe sooner than later, or see if they're interested in collaborating with you. But you definitely need to be, you know, like, what is there, you know, you just can't, you have to avoid being antagonistic and figure out like, what is making them say that? Is it because they're trying to cover their ass and not take risk? Is it because they come from another company where they think they know everything? And you know, you can look at their LinkedIn profile and figure out where, you know, what is driving them? Are they working 50 hours a week, or they're trying to avoid working 50 hours a week? It's really understanding their motivation and then just like honing in on that and figuring out like, okay, you know, so, you know, their issue might be that they're afraid to like say that they're going to miss a deadline. So you need to figure out like, well, if I'm going to tell them to do something that's going to deviate from the roadmap, I need to be sensitive to the roadmap and show them that you're not just like, you know, got this big idea without coming in with an alternative plan. You know, I think that's a big thing.
Strategy. So don't antagonize them, understand what their motivation or their fears are, and then work with that. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank you, James.
I'm trying to catch all the questions. Okay, let's try to answer them all. So 2 questions in one. Angeliki is asking, according to your experience, what is the profile of a successful UX strategist? What is their background in terms of discipline, experience, and education? Nikos is asking, how would you find a clean or an effective process of hiring and onboarding a strategy? So let's talk about strategists. what are their background, disciplines, experience, and how do you hire and onboarding strategist? Let's make it one question. If you,
it's interesting. That's that question I do like, because that is something that's evolving. When I wrote the first book, I had 5 interviews with different strategists, and with all of them, I asked them if they thought that you needed an MBA to do strategy, and all of them said no. And most of that was informed by the fact that, like me, they learned it on their own. But that you know, the world has changed quite a bit, where you can now get an MBA online, and there's going to be definitely an advantage to having, you know, if you're still in college or looking at a master's degree, if you're already really great at design, to taking, you know, getting, you know, an online certificate, you know, and taking some business classes. I don't think you need the degree if you can be self-motivated and read a ton of business books, or listen. Like, I don't read very well, but I listen really well to books, at least. And you know, so all most of the business books, you know, I listened to while hiking, and it made all the difference. You know, it's kind of like how I'm learning German. It's through immersion. And these books like make no sense the first time you go through them. But again, it's just like learning a vocabulary and being able to use that language, and whether you have to put yourself through a degree or a certificate program, or you can just like learn that language by reading the books on your own. That's an important ingredient, you know, is to beef up your business strategy side, to understand online marketing. You know, when I worked at an agency, back in the day, it's like this old lady. We used to always hate the marketing people. We'd be like, you know, God, why don't they shut up? All they talk about is SEO, blah, blah, blah. And, you know, now, you know, with growth hacking and guerrilla marketing and all, and running experiments and integrating social media, it's so much fun. And you really just got to just like embrace it. If you're going to do this stuff, you need to know funnels. You need to know all these different products out there, whether it be Kissmetrics to Google Analytics, and be like, yeah, I've run a few experiments and here's my conversion results, and I've run online advertising campaigns and here's what happened. You know, so if you are at a job that's not going to let you do it, then start taking some freelance projects that's going to let you do that, even if it pays you €1 an hour. You know, I feel like a lot of people say, oh, I'm not going to go on to Upwork or Freelancer or whatever it is, because you know, you're competing against people lowballing. I say better to make $1 an hour than to spend $10,000 on a class, right? Because then you have the professional experience and you've done some client work, even if they paid you $1 or €1. So I think any opportunity to really, you just can't, you know, the only way to do it is through hands-on experience. The only way to learn strategy is the same way that you learn design, which is by practice and getting good at it and building up your confidence. And with strategy, it's again the same thing. That's the educational part. I mean, you could, that's a perfect pivot to talk about my master classes. Hey guys, can I share something?
Great assist.
Here, check this out, guys. So I have these online master classes, and the master classes are already sold out, but the lectures are not. And I'll put it in the chat. And the deal is that it's $600, except it's not for you, because it's $600, right, for everyone who already paid for it. So we can't tell everybody about it. But there's 6 lectures. They start on the 25th and they're recorded, and you can watch the recording up until the next week. And I'll be teaching principles and benefits of UX strategy, the problem space, you know, conducting interviews, you know, going through basically the whole book with my latest and greatest lectures from 2 different universities I teach at. And then you'll get your fill of product strategy. And if you use the code, guess what it is? Anyone got a guess? Greece. Check this out. Apply. Ta-da! It's $150, okay, for 6 lectures. So act now. and I'll post it into the chat. But that's the deal. Is if you want to learn, I'll post this in the chat. And they're an Eventbrite. You could type in UX strategy, Jaime Levy, and you'll find the lectures only. So yeah, sign up for my lectures. They start on the 25th. There'll be 6 of them, and I'll teach you everything I know. What's the second part of your question?
First of all, thank you very much for this. This is so awesome. The second part of the question, I missed that, but I'm going to use your assist about marketing, because Grant is asking, how does UX strategy intersect with brand strategy? Are these complementary disciplines, the brand strategy and the UX strategy?
Yeah, that's a good question. Let's see, I'm going to put it into the Eventbrite for anyone that wants to jump on the Eventbrite, on the join the lectures. Just remember to use Grease, the discount. Okay, so brand strategy is really, I think it's part of product strategy, and the brand strategy typically, if we're talking about related to the product, it's like we're talking about, like, we could be talking about something that's more on the visual design side, like like the logos and the colors and the font and the messaging, or it can be more around the content strategy. What is our brand? If we think about like how they talk to you on products like TaskRabbit or SurveyMonkey, like the onboarding, the cleverness, that's part of their brand. When we think of Apple and their brand and how it's so baked into their products, it's really part of it. But to me, the brand is meaningless if the product or service is garbage. And so people can get so hopped up on, what is our brand? How do we come off as cool, when they should really be focused on what their value proposition is. So I feel like it's a later subset of product strategy that should be on the roadmap, figuring out the branding, but that it's something that's in most cases, if we're not talking about like a band or, something that, a product that is completely like useless except for its brand, that people pay for because of its brand, but otherwise it's just like as good as something else. It's just, I think it's secondary to figuring out what the business strategy is first. I'm happy to hear a debate, though, if you got a better answer.
Oh, okay. I think not now. Okay, do you have, we are okay to do another 1 or 2 questions? Are we okay?
Sure.
Because
yeah.
we have passed 1 hour, 1.5. Okay, I'm not going
Yanni,
to... yeah?
Can I take one, please?
Panagiotis, of course. Hi.
Okay.
Welcome.
First of all, thank you very much, Jamie, being here with us. I'm Panagiotis. I'm the organizer of Athens UX Community, one of the communities that are together for this joint meetup. Really want to be excused for missing the very first part of your talk, but I had already told the guys I had to go to the vaccination center, and I took the shot.
Awesome. Well, that's an awesome excuse. I'm happy for you. That's great.
And I'm feeling fine. Yes, yes.
Good for you.
I wanted to ask you, I know that it seems that you don't like too much customer journey mapping as a method. Could you please comment on that?
Did you watch my most popular video just because it has the word "I hate" on journey maps?
Yeah.
My issue
I think it is important for everybody to hear your.
So first of all, Jim Calbeck is a friend of mine, and I love his book. And I think when you have substantial user research, then journey maps are really important for figuring out customer touch points. I think when you're talking about customer experience versus product strategy, and I'm not getting into that terminology because that's a whole nother talk. these journey maps are absolutely crucial. But when we're talking about digital products, digital services, where no user research has been done, we're focused on the, the discovery phase, then what are we mapping out in the journey map? We're just spending a lot of time making a circuitous map that nobody's going to look at. You can put it up in the bathroom wall. I'm just really trying to come up with techniques that move away from diagramming, that are time consuming, that nobody really wants to decipher, and into the world of spreadsheets that are just like design free, and findings briefs that are just design free, simple, clear, concise, and being real about what you're trying to convince people of. That's my answer to that. I guess I hate on them because most of them are bullshit. How's that?
Okay, Panayotis, do you have a follow-up question here?
No, it's okay. Thanks. I just wanted to hear Jaime talking about this quite important issue, I think.
Yeah. Great topic. Okay, I'm not going to catch all the questions, so excuse me for that. I'm going to give you one more question. Effie is asking, how do you get the product teams to get their heads out of their immediate here and now reactive testing to get things out of the door and get more into strategy? Okay, I'm reading this wrong. Let me do it again. How do you get product teams to get their heads out of the immediate here and now, reactive testing to get things out of the door and more into strategic long-term thinking?
Yeah, it's hard. It's really hard. I mean, I deal with that with clients all the time. Like, we'll be doing strategy and doing workshops, and then all of a sudden comes, oh, we have to launch, and it's gone. It's like that moment has passed because all of a sudden their head's down trying to get a product out the door. And so, there's no easy answer. Like, I almost want to tell sometimes the client, like, let's just get a team that's focused on innovation. Like, this is what works at Volkswagen, is they have an innovation studio, whatever, innovation, buzzwordy, whatever, but at least it's like they're, in a space where they can focus on, near term, future term concepts, and not interrupted by design execution, deadlines. I mean, I just feel like, if we think of our lives and we think about like when we're focused on the future, it's kind of mostly when we're not so bogged down by the present. Otherwise, we're just dealing with putting out fires. And so it's really hard to have teams like being strategic and then have them executing at the same time. And so I feel like I don't like that this is how it is. I wish we could say, okay, we're going to turn off all the noise for 10 hours and focus on strategy simultaneously. And you can set up sessions, with Miro and Mural or whatever, to keep people engaged, and knocking out whatever campuses. I think like that's a healthy environment to have, and having these meetings that are weekly, just like you have your stand-ups. Like, the strategy should be something that's constantly talked about. But if the company just can't buy into that, or even if they say that they are, but they're not doing it, then it's time to start pitching the other model, which is to have a team that's just focused on innovation and saying, okay, I'm going to hire the best people, or we're going to, people who are being the most innovative, I'm going to pluck them and put them, in my group, and we're just going to, be doing this and get buy-in from a stakeholder. Succeed.
Thank you very much. Okay, we have some more questions, but we don't have time. So
take one more of the best questions.
Let me share my screen. So you can throw your questions in LinkedIn. Please use the hashtags UX and UX Greece. And we're going to or say hi or introduce yourself, ask a question to Jaime, ask anything about the UX field, just say anything you want. And we're going to gather those questions, and we're going to select 2 lucky people, and we're going to send them some books wherever they are in the world. Just do it today, tonight, until midnight in Greece. So just do your time calculations. Okay, it's about 3.5 more hours. Stay tuned at the UX Thessaloniki Meetup and Athens UX community for upcoming meetups. We want to thank you, all of you, for being here, for all those great questions. Jamie, thanks a lot for being here. We are expecting you in Greece. It would be great to meet you in person. So let's let's be optimistic that we will be run a meetup or anything but in person this time, maybe this year. Thanks again. Good night to everyone, and see you in LinkedIn.
Thank you, everybody, and thanks so much for having me.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Jamie.